Oh, my hair's a little messed up here. Wait a minute. Let's get it right. Gotta look cute. Here on September 24th at 12 noon. Just took my hat off. It's kind of messy. Okay, but September 24th at 12 noon, talking about October. What do we have coming up in October? We have this coming up. Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir. It's going on. Sam says Mars retrograding gandanta. Really getting intense. Okay. Sam, yes, sir. We're going. We're going. By the way, Sam, my certification course is set up. You were asking me about it. It's there. So now you need to sign up. You asked me about it. So go ahead and do it. Speaking of that, by the way, it is a good month. It's a good time to actually study now, especially with this Jupiter in Sagittarius still. Saturn is in his own sign. We still got incredible power and Shakti and energy to study. Of course, even Mars in his own sign of Aries, really showing a lot of intelligence, wisdom, and, you know, opportunities to study. And I just put a link in the chat there where you can get some free classes now. And if you click on that link, you see that it takes you to this page where it's just a free hours of free classes. And this is real hours of professional training to see, you know, for free, and see if certification is for you. You just go there and you enter your name and information there, and you get the first video on the ancient texts and whatnot. And as you see, first there's this mind map that takes you through the whole, like, all the systems of astrology. This mind map is fantastic because it actually walks you through all the steps that you need, that you actually need to learn how to do astrology well. Starts with the ancient text in the beginning, the history, then, you know, the sacred astronomy ancient texts. That's a 37-minute video. Then video 3, principle stacking and frameworks, where you see these frameworks that are common in yoga and astrology and Ayurveda brought out. Then 40 minutes of principles, methods, and outcomes, where you take these principles and then you turn them into different methods and practices, right? Like the principles lead to things like, you know, analyzing certain methods like aspects and yogas and dashas, and then they lead to outcomes like making predictions. But then you got to prioritize and sequence all of these things. You can't just have a jumble of data, which is what most people have. Most people gather a lot of information and they don't know how to use any of it, so they just get more and more confused, right? So again, this show, through this 4.5 hours of free classes that I give you, I show you all of this. I show you how all of this needs to work sequentially. And then I have the last thing there is, you know, research and case studies. That's what I'm doing today is case study. This is research and case studies. One of the most important things you can do is study the sky all the time and watch what happens, like we're doing now. So that's an important part of learning, is doing research. So I take you through the whole thing. And even when you go there, you can immediately download this Axis of Astrology mind map. And then you enter your, you enter your name and email address. I'll put this here, right? Sign up now, and you go right to the first video there. Let's take a bit here. So you go right to the first video after it loads. There it is. Sometimes when the thing runs, it's a little slow. So again, very easy. It's free. So go check that out. And again, I have these other things here as well. So again, it's a great time to be studying now because of all of these powerful planets, particularly this powerful Jupiter and Saturn. And after Jupiter leaves, by the end of November, Jupiter is going to go into Capricorn, which is Saturn's sign. So even after Jupiter leaves Sagittarius, again, we might say, oh, but then he's going to be debilitated. Yeah, but he's with the ruler. So again, when Saturn goes through Capricorn, it can be difficult because we lose a little bit of, optimism and hope. So now while you have the optimism and hope, what you need to be doing now, while you have the optimism and hope, is find something hopeful to concentrate your energy on. Because when Jupiter starts to move through Capricorn, you're going to want something in your life that's meaningful. Again, Jupiter is really about meaning more than anything else. It's literally about meaning. For example, it's the karaka of children. What do children give our life as much as anything else? They give us meaning, just like our religion. Why do we care about religion? Why do we care about belief? Because without anything to believe in, our life doesn't have any meaning. What's the point of all this? So again, while Jupiter is there in Sagittarius and you're all inspired, then you need to make a commitment to something so that by the time Jupiter starts going through Capricorn and you're starting to lose focus and forget what inspires you, you'll have something like astrology, like the certification course that I'm now doing, to focus on and concentrate on, which is Jupiter with Saturn in Capricorn. So anyway, some people, Sam said, great memory. Yeah, I always remember when people comment on that, I remember it. So I appreciate that you expressed an interest. Now, you going to do anything, or is it just yak, yak, yak? Jayashree said, thank you for your service to the world. You're welcome. Thank you for being here. So go get those free classes. It's very easy. Vedic Astrology Certification.com. So we have this, now we're in October here, and this is October 1st. As it was already pointed out by Sam, Mars is going to be going back and forth in this gandanta point starting at the beginning of the month. I'm going to do an overview of important shifts this month, and then later on I'll do a day-by-day forecast. But this one is going to be an overall forecast. Excuse me, let me take a little drink here. This is going to be a general forecast because we have a few shifts happening with Mars. He's going back. He's retrograde at the beginning of the month. And he's passing through this gandanta point, as was said. Gandanta is where the water and fire signs butt up against each other, and the nakshatra and the rashi both come to a hard stop. And that's called gandanta, which is where the knot, it's said where the knot is starts to loosen. So the knot gets loosened in gandanta. So the thing that keeps everything going strong, where it's, where the rashis are tied together by the nakshatras in these other places, the knot kind of loosens in the gandanta places, and it gets very wispy and shady and unsettled. So Mars passing through this gandanta point is very important here. Let me just say this. I don't know what you're talking about here, Sam. All the videos are sent, and you should be able to access all of them. So I have no idea what you're talking about. If you do have a problem, you can use my help desk, samjeppy.com/help. But I don't understand, because if you're on the email list, then you're getting, and all the videos work. So I don't know what you're talking about. So let me just go on. But anyway, so this Mars retrograde here is going to be moving back and forth. It started in Pisces, then moved to like 3 degrees of Aries, then it starts moving back. So this is a time of course, when the sort of fury and the things that we're needing to fight for are up for grabs, and where again we start to kind of maybe lose focus of what we're fighting for in the world. So again, there's a lot of really strong issues going on now in the world. And again, we can see all this stuff externally in our life as well, though. But externally, we can see it in a lot of the fights that we've been having. Maybe, again, like over the world, we want to see political and social and whatnot. And the fights seem pretty clear the lines seem pretty clearly drawn, we may see a lot of sort of blurring of that, and a hopefully a higher sort of unity consciousness underneath it all, especially for us spiritual people, if I could use that with parentheses, because most of us think we're spiritual, but we're really not. We're just kind of triggered and emotional, not so spiritual. But for spiritual people, this movement of Mars from Aries back into Pisces, and even through this gandanta point, is definitely an opportunity to really let go of a lot of the perhaps anger and frustration that you have with the world, with the corruption or the things that are frustrating you about things that aren't working out, and really reconnect with that more mystical side, that more, authentically spiritual side, which is not necessarily, that doesn't necessarily feel good. One of the biggest things that's really going on in the world that I see over and over now, especially with a lot of our philosophies, and especially with a lot of what a lot of people call now conspirituality, where spiritual people are really buying into a lot of dark ideologies, because again, a lot of spiritual people are really just looking for savior or something, and they're looking for it in really anything. They're looking to feel better and looking for a savior in certain gurus, in all kinds of things. They're really kind of looking for a savior because they want to feel better. Oh, this person will make me feel better. This thing will make me feel better. That's not really spirituality. It's part of it, but it's actually not so much. And this is why I think there's been such a rise of this, again, what we call conspirituality, where so many, again, spiritual type people from the wellness community or whatever have now gone off the cliff into full-on conspiracy theory mode, believing in the QAnon conspiracy and all this stuff. Again, it backs up something that I've said for a long time. I've told a lot of my students for a long time, as they start to read charts and start to do work, don't assume that everybody is spiritual. In fact, very few people are really spiritual in the ways that you are, in the sense of really wanting to know the truth and really working on it and really trying to awaken. That's what spirituality is. It's facing difficulty, not bypassing the work by attaching to some savior figure, whether it's God, this guru, this thing, and then it can turn into something like Trump who's going to save us, or it can then go the QAnon theory, that explains it, or it can go in crazy directions if we're really looking for a savior rather than looking to awaken spiritually. And again, I'm not saying this, I don't want to get into all the politics or things that trigger people, but I'm talking about the notion of why we see so much of this conspirituality now. Again, Jupiter is really powerful, so we're all looking for an answer. What's going on? Oh, I'm so inspired. We're trying to find an answer. And there's a lot of answers out there now, and not a lot of discrimination. And so I think with this, what I'm talking about here with this Mars going retrograde here and dancing through this gandanta point, is that, again, now it's in Aries where we're pretty fired up about our issues again, and then another issue comes and replaces it. There's so much issues going on externally. As it moves back and moves closer to Pisces and starts to get into this gandanta point, like at the beginning of October, a lot of that fury and getting fired up, especially, as I say, with a lot of authentic spiritual people, will start to calm down and lessen, and that knot that has that rope and that knot that has us so attached to it can start to lessen a little bit, because then, as you see, I'll move this forward by a week. By the next week, Mars is back in Pisces again, and Pisces is much more, we would say, confusing. So this is the other part of the issue. Those who are very issue-oriented, like, okay, let's fight to do this thing, let's fight to do that thing, we get into early October, it's not going to be so clear anymore. It's going to get muddled again. All that clarity of this is what I'm fighting for, this is what's right, is going to be like, well, now it's all confused again, for example. And this, so we have this Mars going back and forth in, or, going over this point and then going back into Pisces for the rest of October. Mars goes back into Pisces, where again it's more in that mystical place where this kind of, it's literally like the spiritual warrior, hopefully. And again, when I say spiritual, I mean authentic spiritual. If we're not being the authentic spiritual warrior, then we're the confused, in our imagination again type of, quote, warrior, if you want to call that warrior. And that a lot of that confusion, and especially a lot of the that sort of dream state, can be very fertile, a fertile ground for kind of shaking up our paradigm. Or again, it can lead to a lot of bypassing. And someone said, oops, I notice I notice ways you pay your political views so subtly. Do you not see the same conspirituality with waiting for Biden to pull it together? Well, no, because it's not, conspirituality is, what I'm talking about are people that have now, again, believe, maybe I don't know what you're talking about here. The bypassing of waiting for Biden to pull it together means, I think people see pretty clearly what he is. I'll just say this, that he's old and not as on it as he used to be. I'm not sure what people are waiting to do with that, frankly. But that's not the same thing. I see your point to some extent, but like that people are avoiding saying that or whatever. I hear people, let me just say this. I hear people saying all the time that people aren't saying that he's lost it. So I don't know, it's kind of like a meta thing. People are like, why aren't they talking about how Biden has lost it? While people are talking about how Biden has lost it all the time. I hear them talking about it all the time. Why aren't people, when they talk about how much Biden has lost it, why aren't they comparing it to how much Trump has lost it? That's always the part that gets me. From the beginning, it's always been like, oh, wait till the debates, Trump's going to kill him. And I've always been sitting back like, what do they think's going to happen? I mean, again, both of them are older and have lost it, so to speak, lost whatever it was they had as far as a really sharp edge. So what I'm I think what you're saying though, and I wanted to read the comment because I think there's merit, at least in the idea that maybe some people, quote, on the left or whatever, are also kind of checking out and not paying attention. But I think they are paying a lot of attention to it. What I'm talking about with conspirituality is literally, I'll just say it, many people in the like health and wellness and yoga and literally what we would call spiritual wellness community have gone full-blown into conspiracy theory modes and believe the QAnon conspiracy and believe Donald Trump is this light worker who's going to save us all. So again, instead of it being like a guru, literally like a spiritual guru and spiritual systems, it's literally that Donald Trump is actually a light worker who is here to save us all, particularly from the QAnon conspiracy theory stuff. That's what I'm talking about. When I say conspirituality, that's what I mean. How so much of that has now penetrated. It's not that much, but it's enough to where it's kind of a shocking bypass of what would be considered spiritual, and instead of spiritual, it's just this other story. It's almost like a new religion or something, and it is. It's a cult-like religion type of belief system. And so, again, it's important to look at, and it's arisen at this time with Jupiter in Sagittarius. Again, it's a good case study because, again, for like my students and other people that have listened to me over the years, I've said over and over again, Jupiter in Sagittarius doesn't necessarily mean that the beliefs are good. It just means we want to believe, and it literally means we want to believe. So again, we're still, this October forecast is happening with this backdrop of Jupiter in Sagittarius. Again, I talked at the beginning about how, like with my courses and all that, this is one reason why I re-release the courses now and open my certification course again, because I know people are looking for something to really believe in, and I know it's also going into Capricorn where you're going to want to work hard. But this entire time that Jupiter has also been in Sagittarius has seen this huge rise of all this conspirituality with Jupiter in Sagittarius. So it doesn't mean that our beliefs are like good ones. We can believe anything. I've used the example over and over again that even, terrorism and white supremacy and all that, those are also beliefs. So is this belief that, oh no, Donald Trump is a light worker saving us from the Hollywood pedophiles, and he's this and that and all that. That's a belief that's totally driven by Jupiter, totally Jupiterian. And again, we really saw it rise, especially not just driven by Jupiter in Sagittarius, but also driven, again, Jupiter was joined Ketu in Sagittarius, Rahu in Gemini, so people are looking for answers. That shifted, which I'll talk about in a minute. But also when Mars went through Pisces, again, Mars had gone through Pisces for months. Mars started going through Pisces in, it was like June, like the end of June it started. And again, this is really where we've started to see even more and more of this over the summer. Mars going through Pisces. So we really saw the rise of this at that time. So again, Mars goes back into Pisces by the first week of October. So it starts on the edge of Aries. And starting on the edge of Aries, again, this is the gandanta point where the bonds kind of loosen. Then he goes back into Pisces, where, again, all of the issues in the fight become more confusing. Again, for us spiritual people, authentically spiritual people, it's a time to really connect with that which is more metaphysical and abstract. Okay, let me move on to other placements. But this connection between Jupiter and Sagittarius and Mars going through these two signs for about 7 or 8 months is really important. This is why we've seen such a rise in these belief systems going a little haywire. And these sudden awakenings, like I used to believe, I was a Bernie, I believed in Bernie Sanders and this and that and believed in the left and all. Now I believe in that. And our beliefs can swing wildly. It's very easy if we have a very fanatical belief about one thing to then say, oh, that was ridiculous, and then have an equally fanatical belief about the opposite thing. So we can watch with our heads spinning as to how someone could have been this hardcore like lefty one day and then a month later, all of a sudden, completely lurch to the opposite extreme. But the extremes are always appealing. If someone has a inherently fanatical mindset, like I fanatically want to believe in something, it often is the opposites. They'll go back and forth between the extremes. This is why you see it in relationships. Well, oh, you're my God, you're my Savior. Oh, you're the devil. It's like back and forth. So this is why we've seen so much of these wild extremes in our beliefs. Jupiter and Sagittarius and Mars going back and forth between Pisces, which is our imagination, and I got it all figured out on this higher level. And Aries, which is like, now I'm ready to like fight for it and I'm worked up and ready to do something. So within that context, we also have Mercury starts in Libra the sun starts in Virgo, Venus in Leo. Saturn, of course, is in Capricorn, like I said. And the nodes have moved. Again, we have Rahu in Taurus and Ketu in Scorpio. So this, the node shifting, I did a whole thing about it, but it's bringing, as we've seen pretty quickly, we had a couple, or especially, a few very important things happen. With the U.S. news, we had the recent important Supreme Court judge die, which has now shifted everything very radically and quickly toward something conservative right away. It was like, okay, there you go. There's that Rahu and Taurus. Stable, conservative, and people wanting things to stabilize and wanting to condense their power, concentrate their power, and Rahu is in its exalted place here in Taurus and Ketu in Scorpio. So again, on the world stage, we can see where things could get very simple and concentrated, and even very stuck and conservative. The last time Rahu went through Taurus and Ketu through Scorpio is when we had the actual Gulf War. It's also when we started the Department of Homeland Security, new security forces and all this stuff. It's very conservative, and at the same time where we can want structure and stability, even perhaps at the expense of some freedom. So again, that's more on a cultural, social level. And we've already seen those things happen. On the personal level, again, there's the possibility that a lot of the wandering of Rahu, like when it's in Gemini, and a lot of just grasping for a lot of ideas, starts to calm down. And we can start to really slow down and digest and nurture and nourish the ideas we have, the information that we've gathered, which is Rahu and Taurus, and then also go deep into the emotional pain and frustration of the Ketu in Scorpio. And again, this is very profound for spiritual seekers. For spiritual seekers, this stabilizing nodal aspect for the next year and a half is really profound, because there's less of that stimulation. One of the biggest problems right now, just in the world in general, and I have a lot of friends, obviously, in the healing community. I mean, authentic healers. And the hardest thing now is to get people to concentrate. Nobody can concentrate on anything. It's so hard to get people to concentrate, because we're so bombarded, we're so stimulated, we're overstimulated. We get so many wrong ideas. We don't bother learning things well. I know that I'm one of 1,000 Vedic astrologers that you like or whatever. So I'm glad you listen, but you're probably not learning much, because you're just throwing all your energy everywhere, and you're just entertained by everything. Everything is this entertainment culture that we have. Especially with Rahu going through Gemini, we're like entertained by everything. Again, even entertained by conspiracy theories, and then before you know it, we believe in them, and then before you know it, God knows where we're at. And this illusion of knowledge, this illusion of understanding and wisdom is just I think the biggest problem of our era. We don't know the difference between authentic teaching and wisdom. We're susceptible to every kind of influence now. So I say this because Rahu in Taurus is really a time, the real benefit, one of the biggest benefits of it, is we're going to want to simplify and go deeply into things that really give us a higher value in life and not just stimulate it. Again, the difficult quality of Rahu going through Gemini was just the overstimulation. So much bombarding us. It's not like that's going to stop, but what's going to happen is, especially, and again, I'm talking about especially for people who want to really grow and evolve and develop spiritually and all like that. Pay attention to the imperative that's waking up in you to actually want to slow down and learn stuff and digest it. You know, Rahu is that disembodied head. That disembodied head that's just floating around like gobbling everything up and not digesting any of it. Right? For example, I take a drink. It not only goes in my mouth, but then it goes down my throat and it nurtures me. It nourishes my body. Well, imagine if my head was cut off and I would take a drink and it would just go out the hole. That's kind of what Rahu is. It's just kind of going around eating and not being satisfied, not digesting anything. So when Rahu is in Taurus and Ketu and Scorpio, it's like stabilized. And it's very much like how it really slows it down and brings it into a place where you can be satisfied and satiated by the things around you, because that's the nature of Taurus, is to slow down and enjoy what's in your immediate environment and really connect your immediate environment to your values. And those things that are most valuable become the things you act upon. So Rahu in Taurus is going to have you introspect about what's most valuable to you, because Taurus is about values, and then act on those and be obsessed over that. Be obsessed over what's actually valuable in the world, to you as a person, because Rahu is obsessed. It was just obsessed over ideas, going through Gemini, obsessed over this idea, that idea, maybe this, maybe that. Okay, there's value in that because it shakes up your ideas about things. But then in Taurus, we're obsessed over what's most valuable in the midst of all that. And have I brought it into my immediate environment? And again, it's not just your immediate environment like your food. It's also literally like what you're doing when you wake up every day. And again, what's in your mind? What are you studying? What are you putting your attention on? What kind of food are you eating? And you're not just eating food through your mouth. You're eating food through all of your senses, and mostly through your brain. And the food you put in your mouth forms your brain. They're not disconnected. So all of this whole connection, this holistic connection between your values, how your values filter out into your speech, into your food, into your immediate environment. All of those things are important now with Rahu going through Taurus. And again, we're now, by the time we get into October, we're now really getting into the Rahu and Taurus. It's not just in transition. It's now really, we're starting to sink into it and really feel it. As you can see, by October 8th, Rahu is almost 2 degrees. So he's gone into it by then. So it's time to make a shift away from just the stimulation and the craziness to really concentrate your energy on something that's valuable. What's valuable and important to you? What's highest value? So that's going to really start to take on a real imperative, a real meaning as October starts to go forward. We're going to really start to introspect about our values. And by the way, it's one of the reasons why I said even in general about the election. I'm going to do a final election update, but it's why I think on some level the election in general tends to favor Biden, just because we're going to be looking for whatever it is that we think is going to bring more stability. Now, some may think that's Trump as well, but that's going to be the thing that we look at. And I say Biden represents it more because he's just more traditional of what we've been used to. And again, but whatever it is that we think is going to bring more stability and structure, or maybe it's safety. Again, we have, like, for example, with Trump is trying to make us say you won't be safe in Biden's America, even though we're in Trump's America that's so unsafe right now. But many people buy into that message, and he plays it out like that. So those things are going to be important, but I tend to think that the Rahu in Taurus is going to favor what's more traditional. Again, that used to be conservative, but now the whole chessboard is kind of scrambled. And so those things are shifts in consciousness culturally that we can see. We'll start to at least want something that's more stable. And in your life, though, the way you could see this is how you're being challenged. Forget about all the stuff in the world, to concentrate and not be so scattered. And, as it relates to like what I do and people that interact with me, yeah, actually learning the stuff. I offer all of these classes. You can get all these classes for barely $10 and all this stuff. I offer all this kind of stuff so people will actually learn this and concentrate their mind and energy on it. So again, that's why I mentioned those classes earlier. I'll put the link here again if people just showed up. I'll just put the link. Hours of free classes. Learn this stuff. Learn how the universe works, how it all works. So this Rahu in Taurus and Ketu in Scorpio is great for that. Because again, Ketu in Scorpio is also where we're going to want to go deep into those hidden mysteries in life. Go deeper into that hidden side of life. In a good way, because Ketu is like unrelenting. It's relentless. It's like a drill bit that goes deep into something. So we're supposed to go deep into the Scorpio part of our life. We're supposed to go deeply into our imagined fears and projections. Those fearful triggers are what make us susceptible to things like conspiracy theories and all, because we're terrified. We're afraid of death. We're afraid of the unknown. All that is the Scorpio thing. That's how the Scorpio leads to the Sagittarius. We're all afraid of death, afraid of the unknown, so we're looking to believe in something. That's Scorpio to Sagittarius. So now Ketu in Scorpio is saying, look, don't be so terrified. Just go down and face the truth. And the truth is not something outside. It's not some external answer. It never will be. There's no reason to believe in anything, actually. There's nothing to believe in. All of it's going to disappoint you. You do your spiritual practices and then you know the truth. The truth is something to know, not to believe in. Even when it relates to gurus and stuff. You don't believe in them. You follow them because they're an embodiment of wisdom. And you know they're an embodiment of wisdom because you've connected to wisdom. And you see they're just an extension of the wisdom you've already connected to. And it's not intellectual. It's experiential. Spirituality is experiential. You experience it. You don't believe in it. So again, Ketu in Scorpio is relentless about this kind of stuff. So it's very profound. And we can feel these profound shifts start to become more actual in October. So as you see here in early October, again, I'm just kind of going forward. If we go into the next week, now Mercury has turned retrograde. This is a big shift that's going to happen. Is Mercury turns retrograde? Yeah, it's on the 14th. So you see Mercury turns retrograde on the 14th, and it's for like 3 weeks or so into early November. He actually turns direct on the day before or of the U.S. election. But So this Mercury retrograde in Libra is a big feature as well. Again, when Mercury turns retrograde, it shows where we now have to introspect. Just like Mars is retrograde, we're introspecting and reflecting on what's worth fighting for, what's worth fighting over. Mercury turns retrograde and we introspect and reflect on our ideas, our communication, and how much our ideas are being communicated, how much we're speaking clearly, speaking honestly. You know, Mercury is the planet of lying. It doesn't mean that Mercury is always lying, but when there's lying, Mercury is always involved to some extent. At least with our words. Now, there's other kinds of lying where we withhold things and we hide things, which isn't always Mercury, but Mercury is usually involved. Maybe a powerful Mercury is skilled at covering up other things that we withhold or whatever, secrets that we might have. Excuse me. Because the other big planet of lying and secrets is the 12th house and the 12th house ruler. But Mercury is the speaker. And usually if there's a powerful Mercury, even that other stuff going on, Mercury will want to speak the truth. And many times we don't speak the truth. And we're confused about it. Instead, we use words and we use language to get what we want in an egoistic way. Well, if I say that, then you'll say this, so I can't say that. Okay, then automatically I don't trust you because I don't trust what you're saying. What happens when you find that someone's not being honest with you, right? How does that affect the way you see them? Doesn't take much. The person only has to be dishonest once, and you're like, I don't know if I can believe anything you say anymore. Or even if it's not dishonest, just weird communication where all of a sudden someone springs something on you and you find out they'd been withholding a bunch of things for a really long time. Now all of a sudden something comes out and you're like, whoa, what's all this? Again, this is all Mercury, how we communicate. And we all do it. I'm not acting like any of us don't. And so this Mercury retrograde is a time to really introspect about how you communicate, whether or not you communicate the truth, whether or not you use words to convey the truth, or whether you use words politically. Again, that's political. That's political speak. This is what politicians do that make us all sick. We can see they're lying. They don't answer questions clearly and honestly. It's all spin. It's rhetoric. All politicians. Very rarely do we see any of them that are honest. Totally honest. And because it might, if I say this, you might not like me. If I say this, you might not, maybe I can't hide something from you. Again, so this is one of the things we distrust. But we're all political in some way. So now is a time, so by October 14th, Mercury goes retrograde, and it's a time to really introspect about those things. And we pay the price often for our political speak, and our dysfunctional Mercury, when he goes retrograde, will often get a chance to do something over again, let's say. Like someone might show up from your past who maybe you didn't communicate with very well before, and you get another chance at it. You know, there's always the famous things they say, you know, technology might break down, don't sign contracts, don't do new things or whatever. That's a decent principle to kind of look at time. You know, it's not bad to notice that, but you can't stop living your life. You know, I've done many things when planets are retrograde where those directives are too general. So pay attention to it. And by the way, you know, especially if you have a lot of technology in your life, like I have a very technology-driven business. So before Mercury retrogrades, I always go in and look at certain things because I've had some major problems also happen when Mercury goes retrograde, particularly when it's like debilitated or in a difficult sign. This one is not so much because it's in Libra, where it's in a friendly relationship with the ruler, but especially as it pertains to relationships, because Libra is about relationships. So there's a big opportunity in the middle of October to really unwind and untangle some pretty bad relationship communications and miscommunications maybe that you've had at any point in your life, perhaps also recently or whatever. Again, I say untangle them. You might also have them show up. And it's a good opportunity for that. One of the biggest things that happened with Mercury retrograde, especially, is the capacity to listen more than we speak. Really listen to what people say. Communication isn't just what you say, it's what others say. And your curiosity to really want to understand it. And not just explain it away. Oh, they don't know what they're talking about anyway. Oh, they're just this kind of person. Oh, they're this or that. You know, we attach a label to someone. Oh, they don't know what they're talking about. And then everything they say, we're like, yeah. And we're not listening. We don't listen to them. Oh, she's just a loony. He's just a narcissist. Whatever he says, he's just whatever. And we're not really listening. We think we are, but we've already kind of labeled them in our mind. Again, this is all bad Mercury stuff. This is all Mercury problems, and we all do it. I might have done it 10 times in this forecast so far. Literally, when I say, oh, people aren't really spiritual and blah, 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 blah. Again, these are words. If they were concepts where I was with an individual or in general, you know, we have to not just tune people out because of those things. It's very easy, especially when we start labeling people or labeling groups of people. Again, they're Democrats. They're this. They're lefties. We're so into our labels now. And so, again, this is where all this polarizing comes from. So full of these projections around labels, and it short circuits communication. Again, notice how hard communication is now, particularly because we're so polarized around all the labeling and all that stuff. This is Mercury problems 101. Get so many projections. So notice how you do it and how that cuts you off from the higher truth behind things, and bring suffering in your life because of labeling or marginalizing other people and not really listening to what they're saying or care to listen because you want to be right. No, I'm right. Because you want to keep all of your beliefs intact. And again, this is why it works, because Mercury is opposite Jupiter. Jupiter, we have all these beliefs. I already believe this person is great. I already believe this thing already. And Mercury comes with other information or other things that you weren't expecting. And immediately you just start defending what you already believe. You don't want to hear it. So you get mad at the person who says it, or the fact that they're even saying it. And you don't even investigate whether it's true or not. Maybe what they're saying is true. Maybe it's real. Again, maybe this political figure or this thing or that thing isn't as great as you thought. And it doesn't mean it also doesn't mean the opposite. Like now they're the hell on earth. Again, we're so polarized. We're afraid to get information that collides with our worldview, because then we might go way off the extreme because we've already put too much belief in this thing. Stop believing in all this stuff, in all these things and these structures and these people and all that. Yes, we're in the world, but we're not of the world. So we put so much into all of that then we stop being flexible and stop being able to listen and accommodate and move. This is why communication is so difficult these days, because of so much polarity around labeling and stuff. And you know, I talk about this in astrology all the time anyway, even with the astrology chart. We go so far to the extreme. Like we would see something like this Jupiter in Sagittarius. Oh, you have this Jupiter. It's great. It's the greatest thing ever. Like if you saw this in a birth chart. I have to tell my students, look, don't go so far. Things are good, but they're not that good. Okay, it's good for what it's good for, but it can also be very extreme. Keep things in a middle, more in the middle ground. And again, that's what Mercury does. Mercury keeps things average. It keeps things reasonable and sensible and with good common sense. Mercury and Saturn actually are the ones that really give common sense. Again, we've kind of lost our common sense. We get so far radically extreme with our ideas. Again, I talk about externally, but it's internally as well. We do this all the time. Instead of having a conversation, especially a difficult one, we immediately start arguing, projecting, well, what about what you did to me? You know, one of the biggest problems with even trying to have difficult conversations, particularly like with relationships or friends or whatever, is as soon as you maybe want to bring something up and you want to be heard yourself, as soon as you bring something up, the other person, well, what about when you did that? The kind of whataboutism. Whataboutism is one of the worst things that people do in when they try to have a conversation. I say in arguments, because that will create an argument. Whataboutism. Well, what about when you did that? Okay, well, maybe we can talk about that later. Can we talk about what I want to talk about first? And then I promise you we'll talk about what you want to talk about. So I'm talking about this a lot because Mercury retrograde is going to be a big time, particularly in Libra, to address this tendency. And one of the most amazing things that ever came about was a man, it's called Nonviolent Communication. I'm going to put this here. A man named Marshall Rosenberg. You want to study something amazing. Look at some free videos. Of course, got to be a free video. Got to be free. No. Free video, Marshall Rosenberg, NVC, Nonviolent Communication. It's Marshall with an S. I spelled it wrong. Very good for Mercury retrograde stuff and Mars retrograde, because Mercury and Mars are the two places where communication gets. Mars is I'm ready to defend what I already believe is Mars, and Mercury comes next and says, yeah, but what about this idea? And it's this battle between Mercury and Mars that makes communication so difficult. I already have an opinion. I already know what's right. I'm ready to defend it to the day I die, and here you are with other ideas. And we're both kind of in that place. So both of these planets being retrograde from the middle of October into early November is going to be big. Okay? And so, especially with Mercury in Libra, again, Libra is about finding consensus. So there's a great opportunity to really work through some of your communication issues. And you see as we go through, the last big thing I'll talk about here is the Sun then goes and is debilitated here on the 17th. Now we have the actual Sharad Navratri in October. I made a mistake. It usually comes after the Sun goes through Leo, but since we had two new moons in Ashwini, we're now in Adhik Ashwini, but then we go into the actual Sharad Navratri, which will start in the middle of October on the 16th, I believe is the exact date. But then the Sun goes into Libra right after that, and the Sun is in its debilitated sign at that point. And when the Sun's debilitated, again, we can lose some confidence, we can lose some of our light. But it's also great for being humble and being humbled, which is a lot of what is required when we try to communicate especially when we try to understand authentically why we're not being understood well, because often we're arrogant and other kinds of things. So after October 17th, when the sun goes into Libra, again, it's a time to feel more empowered in a sort of humble way. Many people have this sun in Libra. It still has a lot of power there, of course, but it's the power to be more of service, and not so fired up about our own glory and individuality. The thing we have to be careful of is to not become like unempowered and lose our direction. And again, this is why when our life is already filled with things that give us direction, and we're already on point and on purpose with what we're doing, then when the sun goes through Libra, it's actually quite refreshing to not have to feel like we're always the one having to carry the weight. Because the sun is really the part of us that is ready to carry the weight and carry the burden. And we actually feel more ready to let others be more important than ourselves. And so it can be very empowering at that time to let others carry the burden. And Diwali happens on the next new moon in Libra. It's not on this one. This one is Sharad Navratri. So this will be very important with the sun going through Libra. This ability to let others be in control and powerful. And, especially for those who are already pretty empowered in their life, like they have businesses or all the responsibilities and duties that you have, whether it's in business or not, even in your family or whatever, let others be the important ones for a while, right? And lay down the need to be the important one. One of the things that we will see, though, especially because Saturn is casting an aspect here, especially on these days like 16th, like 17th, 18th, 19th, these days with the sun in early Libra, is one of the things that happens is we can feel sluggish, we can feel kind of tired, digestion can often get low. The whole time when the sun is in Libra, our digestion can slow down a little bit because the sun is the fire, and it's kind of low. So often, eating a little bit less, not being so, having to be a little more proactive, even maybe adding a little hot spice to the food or something like that might be appropriate. For some people, like with me, because I already have a lot of fire, it doesn't necessarily do that. But again, if somebody already has a lot of kapha or their Agni, their fire is already weak in their chart, you might look to do that. Particularly because Mars, the other real fiery planet, is also retrograde in Pisces at that time. So you might look at that in the middle of October till the end, and into the middle of November with the sun there. So then we go through the rest of the month. There's no big shifts that happen as far as Venus. Oh, I'm sorry, there is one. Venus goes into Venus. Sorry, on the 23rd, Venus goes into Virgo, and when Venus is in Virgo, there's that joy of self-expression, you would say, or that joy of I shouldn't be self-expression. That joy that we get from others becomes minimized, and we find a lot of excuses to be critical. So October 23rd, Venus going into Virgo can show where we're more critical. Now again, with Mercury also being Mercury also being retrograde, Venus going into Virgo is also now showing where the ruler is weak. But Mercury and Venus are in an exchange. Again, it gets kind of complicated. Much of the time when Venus is debilitated, there is what's called Nichabanga because Mercury is usually right by. So either way, instead of just saying debilitated, what happens when Venus is in Virgo is we become kind of fussy a little bit about all the details about how I wasn't respected. You didn't treat me the way I deserve to be treated. And this reason, that reason, this reason, that reason. We have a million reasons why we're upset about not being treated the way we feel like we should be treated. That's the sort of archetype of Venus in Virgo, where we're just remember all of the mistreatment. And we're kind of fussy and cranky about it. And so pay attention to that. Pay attention to that fussiness. And Mars is going to be aspecting here from Pisces, especially as it gets later in the month. As it gets into November. But again, realize around the end of October, Mercury is going to be retrograde in Libra, where we're trying to communicate better, like I said, and find more tolerance for others. But then Venus goes into Virgo, and we might just get that sort of cranky, grouchy, well, what about this? Again, that's sort of whataboutism. That whataboutism is very Venus in Virgo. Maybe you want to say something to a person, but you want to try to talk about something, but all they do is whataboutism to you. Well, but what about when you did that? It's hard to work through that. So again, what I said, one second, let me take another drink here. The good thing is with this Nichabanga here, with this exchange between Mercury and Venus, with this exchange, there's more of a dialogue. So this is what happens when the planets exchange like this, is the one helps the other. Venus is in Mercury's sign, Mercury's in Venus's sign, so they exchange. So Venus feels the Venus part of us feels a little sort of cranky, like we're finding all this fault. And then Mercury is there in Libra saying, okay, well, maybe I'm not so perfect either. And yeah, okay, I understand. And maybe instead of being so grouchy and cranky about it, there's more accommodation. So again, this is how the planets benefit when they exchange. And usually when Venus is debilitated, it's either with Mercury, so it's with its ruler, or it's in this Nichabanga where there's this exchange happening. So keep this in mind as well. But Venus and Virgo also can be quite creative. There's a lot of creativity here. Of all the debilitated placements, I don't mind Venus at all, frankly. In some ways, of all the exalted placements, I'm more skeptical of Venus exalted than any other one. It's from years of reading charts. I've seen it again. I've seen so many, especially with Venus exalted, if she's a functional malefic. And the debilitated can sometimes really calm down all of our fantasy projection, romance projection. It can make us very realistic about romance and life and partners. But the price to pay is that we're often we don't feel appreciated. We don't feel respected. We don't feel appreciated. So we find appreciation in something else. And again, it doesn't feel so good often when someone has it, but this is the way to understand it and explain it. And I know people, again, once someone who does have Venus in Virgo, again, there's a lot of other things that can happen. Like it often has this Nichabanga, and there's a lot of other things that can be there. But once they do feel appreciated and respected, this Venus in Virgo is very humble and grateful and of service and devoted. It's very devotional placement. So it has its issue, but it's not, again, this is a perfect example of what I was talking about earlier, where people learn to label things. They don't just learn to label other people, they learn to label things like debilitated, bad, this, that, and we just put labels on things because labeling something shortcuts and short circuits our need to think about it or comprehend it or understand it. Oh, I'll just call it this name. I'll just put this label on it. Then I'm done. I'm done trying to understand it. I don't have to do any more work. I've called it a name. I've labeled it. Now I have them in their category, or I have this thing, this illusion of understanding it. If we can call it a name, we have this idea that we've now mastered it somehow. Oh, that's just that. Oh, okay. So what? So you called it a name. So you've put it in a category. It's a big thing. It's a big problem with astrology students, quote, who really think they understand more than they do. Because being able to identify things and call it a name doesn't mean anything. It's irrelevant, frankly. You have to be able to interpret it. That's the only thing that matters. Nothing else even matters. Don't even bother to call it a name unless you can interpret it. You should be able to interpret Venus in Virgo. You should be able to explain it, not know that it's debilitated. I couldn't care less if you know that. That's simple. And so I'll just show this last one more time because I want people to know that you can get, again, I have these hours of classes that you can get. Hours of professional courses, 4.5 hours worth. Again, whether you get certification or not, or anything like that, you should understand these things and how these things work. You should. You should know how all this stuff works because it's the world you're living in, whether you know it or not. So again, video on sacred astronomy. This is all free. 4.5 hours of free classes. You just give your name and information here. And you get this Axis mind map and how we learn. Then the first video is Sacred Astronomy, Ancient Texts, and More for 37 minutes. I break out all of the whole timeline of history of life on Earth. 4.5 billion years, all concentrated on this genius body that you inhabit. Then Principle Stacking and Frameworks, where I talk about Tamas, Rajas, Sattva, the elements, the planets, how we evolve consciousness through all of these different energies. Again, and that's whether you ever study astrology or not. You want to understand how to evolve all that Mercury problem of pattern recognition and calling things a name and putting a label on something, which is the lowest quality of Mercury that any chimpanzee can do. Literally, any chimpanzee can recognize a pattern and call it a name in their own way. Ah, that. Food, that. Excrement, that. Female, that. Child. But that doesn't mean anything. That's just the basic level of Mercury. Do you want to know how to take that same function and have it be intelligence and discrimination, for example? Those are the things that I explain here. I explain how we do this in astrology. All these faculties of the mind. Then we take those principles and we turn those principles into methods like aspects, yogas, dashas, and all of these systems and methods, and we focus those methods towards outcomes. So I explain this sort of hierarchy of astrological information. Because again, most people, their relationship to even what they're doing, they don't even really understand this category. They have no good they have a little bit of data and information, and then they're trying to make predictions. So, well, there's this, so why didn't that happen? Because you don't have any of it organized. Again, priority and sequence. So in this video, I explain how all of that works, how you can't take things like simple identifying labels and expect to get an outcome from it, because you're not prioritizing any of it and you're not doing any of it in the right order, right? All things aren't equal. You can't take something like, well, it's debilitated, and be able to explain anything that's going to happen, because you're not doing it right. It's not how it works. You're just taking some thing that piece of data and acting like it's going to tell you anything real. It's not. Okay. So in this video, I talk about, this is really the most important thing, this priority and sequence, the royal path. Everything's not as important as everything else, nor is everything as important as everything else at a particular time. So, and there's nothing that really contradicts anything else. Again, you know, astrology students are constantly in this idea that, well, what happens if you have good thing and bad thing? What happens if you have this thing but that thing, this and that, this contradicts that? What if you happen if this is contradicting? All of that, all of it is total nonsense. All of it. Nothing ever contradicts anything. You just don't know how it works. Nothing is contradicting anything. Nothing. Like, say, well, what if you see this in the Rashi chart, but then this in the Navamsha? Okay, then that's what happens. Well, what if it's debilitated, but forming a Raja Yoga? Then what, huh? Well, then that's what it is. So nothing is contradicting anything else. It's all just stuff that you don't organize properly. So again, this is why I talk about this priority and sequence. So again, this is only, you know, this is 5 videos. And again, especially if you're someone who's been gathering a lot of information, endlessly, thinking that you understand a whole lot, and it's all just a jumble, and you're confused by astrology, because that's also what happens, is people are confused by astrology more than they are enlightened by it. And they make a lot of projections about what they think it means. And again, these videos will really help to clarify all of that for you. So again, priority and sequence is really important. It's the most important, but again, I have to teach it here because it's in the right sequence. If I teach priority and sequence here, then I haven't followed the right priority and sequence. You got to do things in the right order, for example. You know, I always use the example of like making an omelet or doing anything that you know how to do correctly. You do it in the right order and you do the right things at the right time. It's simple, but for some reason for astrology, we don't think we need to do it. Like, oh, I could just gather a bunch of data and think I know what I'm doing. No, it's actually, you have to do it right. You have to find the right thing, do it at the right time, in the right proportion. But there's a lot to do. There's a lot of things that can be complicated. So again, this is all what we have in this video. And then the 6th video, research and case studies, shows you how to do things like like I'm doing here in this research. And so like in this research, this is what we do. We have these case studies and we, you know, actually research. You have to research, have case studies, do live things like this, and then we can actually put this into practice and know what we're doing. So again, all you need to do is go to that, you know, it's just go to that website and enter your information there and rock and roll with it, right? It's very easy to enter your name and information, making sense of astrology and life, who you are and why you're here. Download the astrology mind map. So again, I have this dazed and confused. You love astrology, but where do you begin? Kick the astrology junk food habit. Like I talked about. If you're ever going to learn astrology correctly, you must be willing to go deeper than the latest shiny object put forth by the latest YouTube genius. We live in a snacking culture with astrology junk food replacing the authentic teaching and truth. I'm not trying to be critical of people. People are doing good work. I'm just saying that, you know, everyone doesn't do everything, right? We're all not great at everything. By the way, I have been teaching this stuff for a long time. And the certification course and where all this stuff comes from has been tested by, I mean, I've had hundreds of graduates and over again gone through this information. So it's also the age of misinformation. We all have the information we want, but how much of it is authentic? It's not only the age of information, it's the age of misinformation. Crazy and weird theories about the zodiac, misapplication of basic principles, and so much more threaten to undermine the integrity of astrology and other sacred teachings. Yes. You need a system, not more data. Ding, 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 ding. True sciences are systematic in nature, but astrology is not taught that way. Instead, it's often a bunch of disconnected sentences, just the data points with no organizing structure or system. Vedic astrology can be learned systematically like any other science. I know because I've trained more than 250 students over the last 5 years. This was about 4 years ago. It's more than 400 graduates from my school. Complexity stacked on shaky ground. But the more you study, the less you know. Does this sound familiar? When you pile more complexity on shaky ground, you just create a mess. This is why when you try to talk about astrology, and I mean you sound strange and uninformed. You may even embarrass yourself. Aren't I funny? But that's okay. All you need is a good system and you'll be set. You know what you're saying and you'll know how to help people. Don't trust me, good, but verify for yourself. I never ask people to believe me. I invite them to get the free videos and teachings, then see the results for themselves. To make sure to give your name and email address, watch the videos, but then be really honest with yourself. If you see this as something valuable that can shift your life and perhaps the lives of others, invest in it. So yeah, check it out. And I'm talking about this a lot now because I have opened up my certification course again. I don't do it that often. It's only a couple times a year. And people pester me about it the rest of the time. And then when I open it up, they don't follow through. So this is why I don't really respond when people say, I want to take your course. Or yeah. Everybody wants to take it, then nobody does it. Well, I actually, that's really not true. I've already had about 20 people in this latest round. But I mean, a lot of people on YouTube and whatnot, they'll say that all the time, but then hardly any of them who say they'll do it will actually do it. So you don't have to. It's up to you. What I wish you would do, though, is get these free classes, because this doesn't cost you anything. And so check that out. And I appreciate people showing up. And October is going to be full of interesting twists and turns. And I hope it was enlightening for you to listen to this today.